To the casual viewer flipping through channels in the early 2000s, Paul Teutul Jr., or Paulie as he was affectionately known, seemed to have the perfect life. He was a genius artist who could turn a pile of raw steel into a rolling sculpture worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He worked in a dream shop with his brother Mikey, and he starred in one of Discovery Channel's biggest hits. But the cameras, which captured the shouting matches and the thrown tools, only hinted at the darkness lurking beneath the surface of the Teutul family empire. Behind the iconic Orange County Choppers sign, a generational curse of addiction, emotional abuse, and betrayal was quietly destroying the elder son. To understand the tragedy of Paul Jr., we cannot start in the boardroom where he was fired, we have to start in the childhood home where he was ignored. Paul Teutul Sr. was a self-made, hard-driving entrepreneur. He built Orange County Ironworks from the ground up, a fact he never let his sons forget. But in the 1970s and early 80s, while Sr. was building his business, he was also drinking heavily. In a candid special titled The History of OCC, Paul Jr. revealed the scars of a childhood spent waiting for a father who was often physically present but emotionally absent. The drinking years were characterized by broken promises, Jr. noted sadly, recalling a time when his father's word meant nothing because the alcohol had eroded his reliability. Paul Jr. didn't just witness this chaos, he absorbed it. In a desperate attempt to mirror his father or perhaps just to dull the pain of rejection, Paul Jr. fell into substance abuse himself. At the age of 16, while most teenagers are worried about prom and grades, Paul Teutul Jr. was checking into rehab. This is the first major tragedy of his life, the cycle of addiction. The son who watched his father struggle with sobriety walked the exact same plank. While American Chopper would later portray Mikey as the lovable, goofy sidekick, Mikey also revealed that he spent years getting wasted every night. The Teutul household was a pressure cooker of silence and rage, masked by the roar of V-twin engines. When American Chopper premiered in 2003, the tension between father and son was the fuel that powered the show. Fans loved watching Sr. scream about deadlines and budgets while Jr. meticulously crafted a gas tank or a set of handlebars. But the show's editing often played the conflict for laughs, the old man yelling at the kid. However, those who paid close attention saw the hints of genuine cruelty. Paul Sr. was a product of the My Way or the Highway school of management. If a bolt was missing, the fight wasn't about the bolt. As Paul Jr. explained, usually the arguments aren't about what they start out to be. They end up being something more, something having nothing to do with motorcycles. The shop floor became a battleground for a war that started in the living room decades prior. Sr. resented Jr.'s fame, Jr. resented Sr.'s dictatorship. In 2005, the cracks became canyons. The show was at its peak, but the relationship was at its nadir. Paul Jr. began to realize that his father saw him not as a partner, but as an employee, an ungrateful one at that. Sr. had built the business, but Jr. had built the brand. The bikes Jr. designed, from the jet bike to the Comanche, were the artistic heart of OCC. Yet, any request for creative freedom or financial equity was met with explosive anger. The hints of the coming explosion were there. The silent treatments, the undermining of Jr.'s authority in front of the crew, and the constant moving of the goalposts designed to make the son fail. The pressure finally blew the roof off in 2009. In an episode that became instantly iconic, and later a meme, Paul Sr. screamed at Paul Jr., firing him in a fit of rage that culminated in Sr. throwing a chair. It was dramatic television, but for Paul Jr., it was the sound of his entire world collapsing. The tragedy here isn't that he was fired, it was how he was erased. Despite being the lead designer and a 20% owner of the company, Paul Jr. was cast out like a broken spoke. The ensuing years were not a relief, they were a brutal war. Paul Jr. invoked a non-compete clause, forcing him to sit on the sidelines for a year, forbidden from doing the only thing he knew how to do, build bikes. When he finally launched Paul Jr. Designs, his father didn't wish him well. Instead, Paul Sr. launched a legal assault. The lawsuit, Teutul v. Teutul, became a public dissection of the family's finances. Paul Sr. tried to force a buyout of Paul Jr.'s shares at a fraction of their worth, leading to an ugly court battle that dragged the family name through the mud. The tension peaked with a moment of profound sadness. Paul Sr. skipped Paul Jr.'s wedding in 2010. Despite being invited, the patriarch refused to attend his own son's wedding. For a full decade after the chair-throwing incident, the two men barely spoke. They existed in the same industry, lived in the same state, and shared the same blood, yet they were strangers. The shop that once echoed with the sound of hammers was now silent, divided into two warring camps, OCC versus PJD. The most heartbreaking segment of this story isn't the yelling or the lawsuits, it is the quiet resignation of Paul Jr. as he became a father himself. In various interviews and his memoir, The Build, Designing My Life of Choppers, Family, and Faith, Paul Jr. reveals the deep psychological injury his father inflicted. In a moment of raw vulnerability, Paul Jr. spoke about looking at his own son, Hudson 7 Teutul. He confessed that he was confused as to why his own father was so competitive with him. Instead of nurturing his talent, Sr. tried to crush it. "I want my own son to be better than me," Paul Jr. said, drawing a stark contrast to his own upbringing. He admitted that for years, he struggled to understand why his father viewed his success as a threat rather than a victory for the family name. He also found Jesus. In his memoir, Paul Jr. talks extensively about becoming a born-again Christian at 12 and how his faith was the only thing that kept him grounded during the uncertain times of the lawsuits and the firing. Yet, even faith couldn't fully heal the wound of paternal rejection. The emotional break occurred when Paul Jr. finally stopped fighting. He stopped trying to win Sr.'s approval. He realized that the man who yelled at him on TV was incapable of giving him the love he needed. "Working together was the downfall of our relationship," Paul Jr. conceded, accepting that the dream of a functional family business was dead. The truth, however, is that the heartbreaking tragedy of Paul Teutul Jr. has a twist. He survived. But survival came at a cost. The net worth estimates for Paul Jr. fluctuate wildly. Some sources claim $2 million, others up to $7 million, but the financial numbers miss the point. The truth is that Paul Jr. sacrificed his 20s and 30s to a toxic environment for the sake of a television show. When the reboot American Chopper returned in 2018, fans hoped for a happy ending. The two Pauls reconciled, sort of. They agreed to be civil. But as Paul Sr. told People magazine, they learned a hard lesson: working together was the downfall of our relationship, and I'm not willing to give that up again. The truth is that the only way for Paul Jr. to love his father was to stop working with him. The tragedy is that the very thing that bonded them, motorcycles, was also the poison that destroyed their trust. Furthermore, the family legacy remains tainted by Sr.'s later legal troubles, including bankruptcy filings and lawsuits over unpaid debts and photograph usage. While Sr. moved to Florida to open the OCC Roadhouse, Paul Jr. stayed behind in New York, quietly building bikes and raising his son. He broke the cycle. He does not scream at his child. He does not drink away his evenings. He has built a stable, loving home. But the cost was a decade of his life spent in litigation and silence. Today, the roar of the American Chopper engines has faded into the static of cable TV reruns. Paul Teutul Jr. is no longer the kid trying to prove himself. He is the father now. He is the one breaking the generational curse of addiction and emotional abuse. He holds the hammer, but he refuses to throw it. Looking back at the arc of his life, the tragedy of Paul Teutul Jr. is not that he failed. He succeeded despite his father. The tragedy is that the man who taught him how to weld never taught him how to feel loved. The millions of fans who watched the show were watching a slow-motion car crash of ego and pain. But in the wreckage, Paul Jr. found something his father never did: peace. He built the bikes, he survived the show, he won the lawsuits. But the one bike he could never build was the one that would carry him across the bridge to his father's approval. And that is the heartbreaking reality of Orange County Chopper. Sometimes, the most beautiful machines are built by the most broken hearts.